The morning sun cast long shadows across the palace courtyard as Guard Captain Marcus Wellington adjusted his ceremonial red tunic for the third time. 22 years of service had taught him that perfection was not optional when protecting the royal family. Every brass button gleamed, every crease was razor-sharp, and his black boots reflected the cloudless sky above. The annual Children's Day celebration was always chaotic, but this year felt different. Hundreds of families had gathered on the palace grounds, their excited children clutching balloons and cotton candy. Marcus watched from his post near the main entrance, his trained eyes scanning the crowd for any signs of trouble. His fellow guards stood at attention along the perimeter, their red uniforms creating a human barrier between the royal family and the excited masses. Princess Catherine had just emerged from the palace with her two young children, Prince George and Princess Charlotte. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Camera flashes sparkled like stars as photographers jostled for the perfect shot. Marcus felt the familiar surge of pride that came with protecting Britain's beloved royals, but also the weight of responsibility that never left his shoulders. The event was supposed to be simple. The princess would walk through the crowd, greeting families and accepting flowers from children. The security team had rehearsed this dozens of times. Every entrance and exit was monitored. Every guest had been screened and emergency protocols were in place. Nothing could go wrong, or so they thought. As the princess moved through the crowd with her children, Marcus noticed a young mother struggling with an oversized navy blue stroller. She was trying to navigate through the dense crowd while juggling a diaper bag, a crying infant, and what appeared to be a restless toddler who kept trying to escape. The woman looked exhausted and overwhelmed, sweat beading on her forehead despite the cool morning air. The stroller was one of those expensive all-terrain models, built like a small tank with thick wheels and a sturdy frame. It was loaded down with bags, toys, and baby supplies, making it even more unwieldy. The mother, Sarah Collins, had driven 3 hours from Manchester with her two children, just for this moment. She had saved for months to afford the trip, dreaming of the photos she would take of her children meeting the princess. Marcus kept one eye on the struggling mother, and one eye on the approaching royal party. Standard protocol required him to maintain his position unless directly ordered otherwise or in case of emergency. The crowd was getting more excited as the princess drew nearer, and people began pushing forward, eager for a better view. Children sat on their father's shoulders, mothers held up phones to record the moment, and the energy in the courtyard was electric. The mother with the stroller was now directly in front of Marcus's position. About 30 feet from where the princess was greeting a group of schoolchildren, she was trying to turn the heavy stroller around to get a better angle for photos, but the crowd behind her was pressing forward. Marcus could see the panic starting to build in her eyes as she realized she was losing control of the situation. What happened next would be replayed on news channels around the world, analyzed by security experts and debated in Parliament. But in that moment, Marcus was simply a professional doing his job, unaware that his life was about to change forever in the most unexpected way. The moment everything went wrong started with a simple stumble. Sarah Collins, the overwhelmed mother from Manchester, stepped backward while trying to maneuver her heavy stroller, not realizing that a small child had dropped a juice box directly behind her feet. Her heel caught the sticky container, and she lost her balance completely. As Sarah fell, her grip on the stroller loosened. The fully loaded all-terrain stroller, weighing nearly 40 pounds with all the baby supplies, began rolling down the slight incline of the palace courtyard. The thick wheels gained momentum quickly on the smooth stone surface, and what started as a gentle roll became a dangerous projectile heading straight toward the crowd. Marcus saw it happening in slow motion, the way trained security personnel often do in crisis situations. His mind immediately calculated the trajectory. The runaway stroller was heading directly toward a group of elderly visitors who had no way to move quickly enough to avoid impact. Worse yet, beyond them stood Princess Catherine with her children, completely unaware of the approaching danger. Without hesitation, Marcus broke from his ceremonial position. His polished boots pounded against the courtyard stones as he sprinted toward the stroller's path. 22 years of military and security training kicked in, overriding every protocol about maintaining position. His only thought was protecting the innocent people in that stroller's destructive path. The crowd began to notice the commotion. Screams rang out as people pointed at the runaway stroller barreling toward them. Some tried to move out of the way, creating a dangerous stampede effect as bodies pressed against each other. Others stood frozen, unable to process what was happening quickly enough to react. Marcus reached the stroller just as it approached maximum speed. Without thinking about his own safety, he threw himself directly into its path, using his body as a human shield to stop the heavy contraption. The impact was tremendous. The stroller's metal frame slammed into his chest and abdomen with the force of a small vehicle, knocking the wind completely out of his lungs. The collision sent Marcus sprawling backward onto the hard stone courtyard. The stroller flipped over on impact, spilling baby bottles, toys, and diaper bags across the ground in a chaotic mess. The sound of the crash echoed through the suddenly silent courtyard as hundreds of spectators watched in shocked disbelief. For a moment, nobody moved. The only sounds were the scattered cries of startled children and the distant hum of traffic beyond the palace walls. Princess Catherine had stopped walking and was looking toward the commotion with concern, her security detail immediately moving to form a protective barrier around her and the children. Marcus lay on his back, staring up at the clear blue sky, trying to catch his breath. Pain shot through his ribs and chest, but his first thought was not about his own condition. His eyes quickly scanned the area to make sure no civilians had been hurt. The elderly visitors who had been in the stroller's path were safe, though shaken. The princess and her children were secure behind their human shield of security personnel. Sarah Collins had managed to get back on her feet and was running toward the scene, tears streaming down her face. Her baby was crying in her arms, more from confusion than injury, and her toddler was tugging at her dress, asking what had happened to the nice soldier man. Other royal guards rushed to Marcus's position, their ceremonial composure abandoned in favor of helping their colleague. The palace's medical team, always on standby during public events, was already pushing through the crowd with their equipment. Camera phones appeared everywhere as spectators began recording and photographing the dramatic scene. Marcus tried to sit up but immediately felt a sharp pain in his chest that made him wince. His pristine red uniform was now torn and dirty, his ceremonial hat had fallen several feet away, and his usually perfect appearance was completely disheveled. But he was conscious, alert, and most importantly, he had prevented what could have been a much worse tragedy. The consequences of those few seconds of heroic action were about to unfold in ways that nobody, especially Marcus himself, could have predicted. The palace medical team reached Marcus within minutes, but those minutes felt like hours as he lay on the cold stone courtyard. Dr. Jennifer Hayes, the royal family's personal physician, knelt beside him with practiced efficiency. Her gentle hands probed his chest and ribs while she asked him questions to assess his consciousness and potential internal injuries. "Can you tell me your name and today's date?" Dr. Hayes asked, shining a small flashlight into his eyes to check for signs of concussion. "Captain Marcus Wellington." "May 15th Children's Day celebration?" Marcus replied through gritted teeth, his voice strained but clear. The pain in his chest was getting worse, and he could taste something metallic in his mouth that worried him. Princess Catherine had insisted on approaching the scene despite her security team's protests. She knelt down beside Marcus, her face filled with genuine concern. "Thank you," she said quietly, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "What you did was incredibly brave. You may have saved lives today." Marcus tried to respond, but a sudden coughing fit overtook him, and he noticed small specks of blood on his lips. Dr. Hayes immediately called for the ambulance that was always stationed nearby during royal events. "We need to get you to hospital right away," she said firmly. "You may have internal injuries that require immediate attention." The crowd had been moved back to give the medical team space to work, but hundreds of people remained watching from a distance. News reporters who had come to cover the cheerful Children's Day event suddenly found themselves documenting a dramatic rescue story. Within minutes, footage of the incident was being uploaded to social media platforms around the world. Sarah Collins finally reached the scene, still carrying her crying baby and holding her toddler's hand. She was sobbing as she looked down at Marcus. "I'm so sorry," she kept repeating. "This is all my fault. I should have been more careful with the stroller. Please, is he going to be okay?" Marcus managed to turn his head toward her and gave what he hoped was a reassuring smile. "Not your fault, ma'am," he wheezed. "Accidents happen. Are your children hurt?" "No, they're fine, but you're not," Sarah replied, her guilt overwhelming her relief. "You saved those people, and you saved my children from having to live with the knowledge that our stroller hurt someone." The ambulance arrived with sirens wailing. and paramedics quickly took over Marcus's care from Dr. Hayes. As they loaded him onto a stretcher, he caught sight of his fellow guard standing at attention in a formal salute. The gesture of respect from his colleagues brought unexpected tears to his eyes. The ride to St. Mary's Hospital was a blur of medical procedures and concerned faces. X-rays revealed 3 cracked ribs and internal bruising, but thankfully no life-threatening injuries. The doctors said he had been incredibly lucky, considering the force of the impact. They wanted to keep him for observation for at least 48 hours. While Marcus was being treated, the story of his heroic act was spreading like wildfire across the internet. The hashtag #DireRoyalGuardHero began trending on Twitter within hours. News outlets around the world picked up the story, praising the guard who had sacrificed his own safety to protect others during a royal event. But not everyone saw Marcus's actions in a positive light. Palace security protocols existed for very specific reasons, and some officials were concerned that he had abandoned his post without authorization. Colonel James Morrison, head of royal security, arrived at the hospital that evening with a stern expression and a thick folder of incident reports. "Captain Wellington," Colonel Morrison said as he entered Marcus's hospital room, "we need to discuss what happened today. While your intentions were admirable, you violated direct orders by leaving your assigned position." Marcus struggled to sit up straighter in his hospital bed, the pain medication making him feel dizzy. "Sir, I saw civilians in immediate danger. I couldn't just stand there and watch innocent people get hurt." "That's exactly what you were supposed to do," Morrison replied coldly. "Your job was to maintain your position and protect the royal family, not to play hero with members of the public. We have specific procedures for handling emergencies, and you ignored all of them." The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Princess Catherine entered quietly, having insisted on visiting Marcus despite her security team's objections. Colonel Morrison immediately stood at attention, clearly uncomfortable with the royal family becoming involved in what he considered a disciplinary matter. "Colonel Morrison," the princess said with a polite but firm tone, "I hope you're here to commend Captain Wellington for his extraordinary service today, not to reprimand him." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife, and Marcus realized that his split-second decision to stop that stroller was about to have consequences far beyond his physical injuries. The confrontation between Princess Catherine and Colonel Morrison created an awkward silence in Marcus's hospital room. The princess stood with quiet authority, her eyes fixed on the security chief who clearly hadn't expected royal interference in what he considered an internal disciplinary matter. "Your Highness," Colonel Morrison said carefully, "with all due respect, Captain Wellington violated fundamental security protocols. His position was specifically chosen to monitor that entrance. When he abandoned his post, he created a security gap that could have been exploited by anyone with malicious intent." Princess Catherine stepped closer to Marcus's bedside, her voice remaining calm but carrying an unmistakable edge. "What I saw today was a man who prevented potential tragedy. Those elderly visitors could have been seriously injured, and my children witnessed an act of genuine heroism. Sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the rules." Marcus watched this exchange with growing discomfort. He had never wanted to become the center of a conflict between the royal family and palace security. His 22 years of service had been built on following orders and maintaining discipline. But in that split second, his human instincts had overridden his training. "Ma'am," Marcus interjected weakly, "Colonel Morrison is right about protocol. I should have radioed for backup instead of acting alone. I put the security operation at risk." The princess turned to him with surprise. "Captain Wellington, you put yourself at risk to save others. That's the definition of courage, not insubordination." Over the next several days, as Marcus recovered in the hospital, the story took on a life of its own. Social media exploded with support for the hero guard, who had sacrificed himself to save innocent bystanders. Royal Guard hero continued trending globally, with millions of people sharing the dramatic footage and praising Marcus's quick thinking and bravery. Television talk shows debated the incident, with some guests arguing that Marcus was a hero who deserved recognition, while others maintained that security protocols existed for good reasons and couldn't be ignored. Regardless of the outcome, the story became a talking point about duty versus conscience, rules versus humanity. Sarah Collins, the mother whose stroller had caused the incident, gave tearful interviews to several news outlets. She described the guilt she felt and praised Marcus as an angel who had prevented what could have been a devastating tragedy. She started a crowdfunding campaign to help with his medical expenses, which quickly raised tens of thousands of pounds from supporters around the world. Meanwhile, palace officials were conducting a thorough investigation of the incident. Security footage was analyzed frame by frame, witness statements were collected, and every aspect of the event's planning and execution was scrutinized. The investigation revealed that while Marcus had technically violated protocol, his actions had indeed prevented multiple injuries and potentially saved lives. The public pressure was mounting for the palace to publicly recognize Marcus's heroism rather than punish him for breaking rules. Newspapers ran editorials praising his split-second decision-making. Members of parliament made statements supporting him. Even international media outlets picked up the story, contrasting the rigid adherence to protocol with basic human decency. But inside the palace walls, the debate was more complex. Security experts argued that if guards felt free to abandon their posts whenever they perceived a threat, the entire protection system could break down. What if Marcus had been wrong about the stroller's trajectory? What if his abandoned position had been exploited by someone with harmful intentions toward the royal family? Colonel Morrison found himself in an impossible position. He genuinely respected Marcus as a guard and understood why he had acted as he did. But he also had to maintain discipline and security standards that protected the royal family every single day. The media attention was making it impossible to handle the matter quietly through internal channels. On Marcus's third day in the hospital, he received an unexpected visitor. An elderly gentleman in an expensive suit entered his room, accompanied by a palace aide. The man introduced himself as Sir Robert Whitmore, the Queen's private secretary. Captain Wellington, Sir Robert said formally. Her Majesty has asked me to convey her personal gratitude for your actions during the Children's Day celebration. However, she also wants you to know that this matter has created a significant challenge for palace security protocols. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Despite all the public support, despite the princess's backing, it seemed like his career might still be over. He had always known that serving the royal family meant following orders without question. And he had failed that fundamental test. Sir, Marcus replied quietly, I understand the consequences of my actions. I'm prepared to accept whatever decision is made about my future. Sir Robert studied him for a long moment before responding. The decision hasn't been made yet, Captain. But I can tell you that this situation has sparked discussions at the highest levels about balancing security requirements with human judgment. Your case may change how we handle these situations in the future. As Sir Robert left the room, Marcus realized that his split-second decision to stop a runaway stroller had set in motion events that could reshape royal security procedures for generations to come. Marcus was discharged from the hospital on a Friday afternoon, his chest still wrapped in bandages and his breathing shallow from the lingering pain in his ribs. The media circus waiting outside caught him completely off guard. Dozens of reporters, photographers, and television crews had gathered, turning his quiet exit into a chaotic press conference he never wanted. Captain Wellington, how do you feel about being called a national hero? Shouted one reporter, thrusting a microphone toward his face. Do you have any regrets about breaking protocol? Called another. Will you be returning to active duty? Came a third voice from the crowd. Marcus, still weak and overwhelmed by the attention, managed only a brief statement. I was just doing what felt right in the moment. I'm grateful that no one was seriously hurt, and I respect whatever decision the palace makes about my future. His words were immediately broadcast across news channels and social media platforms, analyzed and debated by commentators who had never spent a day in uniform or faced a split-second decision that could save or endanger lives. The simple statement somehow made him even more popular with the public, who saw his humility as further evidence of his character. At home in his small flat near Windsor, Marcus found no peace from the constant attention. His phone rang continuously with interview requests, book deal offers, and appearance opportunities. Neighbors who had barely spoken to him in 5 years suddenly wanted to chat about his newfound fame. The quiet, orderly life he had built around his military routine was completely disrupted. The palace investigation concluded after 2 weeks of intensive review. Colonel Morrison delivered the findings to Marcus in person. arriving at his flat on a rainy Tuesday morning with a formal envelope bearing the royal seal. The investigation has determined that while you violated established protocol, your actions prevented serious injury to multiple civilians, Morrison read from the official document. However, the security implications of abandoning your assigned position cannot be overlooked. Regardless of the positive outcome, Marcus sat quietly, waiting for the verdict that would determine whether his career was over. The decision has been made to issue you a formal reprimand for failure to follow orders, but you will not face dismissal from service, Morrison continued. However, you are being reassigned to a training position at the academy effective immediately. You will no longer serve in active protection duties for the royal family. The news hit Marcus harder than the Stroller had. Training new guards at the academy was important work, but it meant his days of standing beside the royal family, of being part of their protection team, were over. 22 years of dedicated service had been reduced to a teaching position because he had chosen to save lives instead of following orders. Sir, Marcus said quietly, I understand the decision, but I want you to know that given the same situation, I would make the same choice again. Morrison's stern expression softened slightly. I know you would, Captain. That's exactly why we can't have you in an active protection role anymore. Good judgment and following orders don't always align, and we can't have guards making individual decisions about when to break protocol, even with the best intentions. The public reaction to Marcus's reassignment was swift and angry. Social media exploded with criticism of the palace's decision. Justice for Marcus began trending, with thousands of people expressing outrage that a hero was being punished for saving lives. Petitions demanding his reinstatement to active duty gathered hundreds of thousands of signatures within days. Princess Catherine made an unprecedented public statement about the situation, carefully walking the line between supporting Marcus and respecting palace security decisions. Captain Wellington demonstrated the kind of character and quick thinking that makes our protection officers extraordinary, she said during a charity event. While I respect the need for security protocols, I also believe in recognizing courage when we see it. The controversy reached Parliament, where several MPs raised questions about palace security procedures and whether rigid adherence to protocol was more important than protecting innocent civilians. The debate highlighted broader questions about authority, individual responsibility, and the balance between following orders and doing what's morally right. Marcus tried to stay out of the political firestorm his actions had created, but the attention continued to follow him everywhere. Documentary filmmakers wanted to tell his story, publishers offered book deals, and speaking agencies promised lucrative careers on the lecture circuit. The quiet guard who had simply tried to help people suddenly found himself at the center of national debates about heroism and duty. At the training academy, his new colleagues treated him with a mixture of respect and curiosity. Some saw him as a legend who had chosen conscience over career, while others worried that his example might encourage other guards to ignore orders when they disagreed with protocol. The academy's director made it clear that while Marcus was welcome, any teaching about security procedures must emphasize the importance of following established protocols. 3 months after the incident, Marcus received another unexpected visitor. Princess Catherine arrived at the training academy unannounced, requesting a private meeting that sent ripples of excitement and nervousness through the entire facility. She had come with a proposal that would once again change the course of Marcus's life in ways he never could have imagined. Princess Catherine sat across from Marcus in the academy's small conference room, her presence transforming the mundane space into something that felt almost sacred. She had dismissed her security detail and requested complete privacy for their conversation, something that rarely happened in the carefully controlled world of royal protocols. Captain Wellington, she began, her voice warm but serious, I have a proposition for you that goes far beyond your current situation. What happened that day at the Children's Day celebration has made me realize something important about the kind of people we need in positions of responsibility. Marcus listened intently, still puzzled by why the princess would personally visit him at the training academy. The formal reprimand had been difficult to accept, but he had made peace with his new role as an instructor. The idea that his story might continue to evolve hadn't occurred to him. I've been working with several charitable organizations that focus on child safety and emergency response, the princess continued. Your actions demonstrated exactly the kind of quick, thinking and selfless decision-making that could save countless lives if properly channeled and taught to others. She explained that she wanted Marcus to become the face of a new national campaign focused on emergency response training for civilians. The program would teach ordinary people how to react in crisis situations, from medical emergencies to accidents like the Stroller incident. His real-world experience and proven willingness to put others first made him the perfect spokesperson for such an initiative. This would mean leaving the palace service entirely, she said, watching his reaction carefully. You would work directly with my foundation, traveling across the country, training first responders, teaching school children, and helping communities prepare for emergencies. It's not traditional guard duty, but it's a chance to save far more lives than you ever could standing at palace gates. The offer was overwhelming. Marcus had spent his entire adult life in structured military and security roles. The idea of public speaking, traveling constantly, and being the face of a national campaign terrified him more than any security threat he had ever faced. But the princess's words resonated with something deep inside him that had been awakened the day he threw himself in front of that stroller. "Ma'am," Marcus said slowly, "I'm honored by your confidence in me, but I'm not sure I'm the right person for such a public role. I'm a soldier, not a spokesman." Princess Catherine smiled. "That's exactly why you're perfect for this. People don't want polished presentations from professional speakers. They want to learn from someone real, someone who has actually faced these situations and made the hard choices. Your story has already inspired millions of people around the world. Imagine what you could accomplish if you used that platform to teach them how to save lives." Over the following weeks, Marcus wrestled with the decision. The princess's offer represented a complete departure from everything he had known and planned for his life. His military pension would be secure, but this new path was full of unknowns. Would people really want to learn from him? Could he handle being in the public eye permanently? What if he failed at this new mission? The decision became easier when he received a letter from Sarah Collins, the mother whose Stroller had started it all. She had been following his story closely and wanted him to know how his actions had affected her family's life. "My children ask about the brave soldier every day," she wrote. "My daughter Emma, who is only 4, has started playing rescue games where she pretends to help people who are in trouble. She says she wants to be brave like Captain Marcus when she grows up. Your example has taught my children that heroes are real people who choose to help others, even when it's scary or difficult." Reading Sarah's words, Marcus realized that his impact extended far beyond preventing injuries that day. He had become a symbol of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, of choosing courage over comfort, of putting others first even when it costs you something precious. The princess was right. He could save more lives by teaching others to act with similar courage and quick thinking. Marcus submitted his resignation from palace service on a crisp autumn morning, exactly 6 months after the Stroller incident. Colonel Morrison accepted the paperwork with mixed emotions, respecting Marcus's decision while expressing regret at losing such a dedicated officer. "You know, Wellington," Morrison said as they shook hands, "I still believe you were wrong to abandon your post that day, but I also can't argue with the results. Maybe that's the most important lesson of all. Sometimes being wrong about the rules is less important than being right about what matters." The news of Marcus's transition to civilian work with the princess's foundation made headlines around the world. The guard who had sacrificed his career to save strangers was now embarking on a mission to teach others how to be heroes in their own communities. It was a story that seemed perfectly crafted for a world hungry for examples of genuine heroism and human decency. But as Marcus prepared for his new role, he had no idea that his first major public appearance would present him with another split-second decision that would test everything he had learned about courage, duty, and the price of doing what's right. The consequences of stopping that stroller were far from over, and the most challenging chapter of his story was yet to be written. Marcus's first major public appearance as the face of the princess's emergency response campaign was scheduled for a children's safety fair in Birmingham. Thousands of families were expected to attend the weekend event, which would feature demonstrations, training sessions, and educational exhibits about emergency preparedness. It was meant to be a positive, family-friendly introduction to his new civilian role. The irony wasn't lost on him that his debut would be at another children's event, similar to the one where his life had changed forever, as he practiced his presentation in the hotel room the night before. Marcus felt more nervous than he ever had facing potential security threats. Speaking to crowds of civilians about safety and heroism felt far more daunting than protecting royalty from known dangers. The morning of the event dawned gray and drizzly, typical British weather that couldn't dampen the enthusiasm of the families streaming into the Birmingham Convention Center. Marcus arrived early, wearing a simple navy blazer instead of his familiar Red Guard uniform. He felt exposed and uncertain without the authority and structure that military dress had always provided. His first presentation went better than expected. Speaking to a group of about 200 parents and children, Marcus told his story with quiet sincerity, emphasizing that heroism wasn't about being fearless, but about acting despite fear when others needed help. The audience listened intently, and several people approached him afterward with questions about emergency response training. During the lunch break, Marcus was walking through the exhibition area when he heard a commotion near the main entrance. A crowd was gathering around something and he could hear raised voices and what sounded like crying. His old instincts kicked in immediately, and he moved toward the disturbance to assess the situation. What he found shocked him to his core. Sarah Collins, the mother whose stroller had struck him 6 months earlier, was in the center of a heated confrontation with a group of protesters. They were holding signs reading, "No more royal privileges and heroes. Don't break rules," apparently, targeting Marcus's appearance at the event. "This woman's carelessness started this whole mess," one protester was shouting at Sarah, who was trying to shield her 2 children from the hostile crowd. If she had controlled her stroller properly, none of this would have happened. Now taxpayers are funding this publicity stunt for a guard who couldn't follow orders. Sarah was crying and trying to push through the crowd with her children, but the protesters had surrounded her, using her as a symbol of everything they believed was wrong with Marcus's story. Her 4-year-old daughter Emma was clinging to her leg, terrified by the angry voices while her baby son screamed in his stroller. Marcus didn't hesitate. Just as he had 6 months earlier, he moved immediately to protect innocent people from harm, though this time the threat was emotional rather than physical. He stepped directly between Sarah and the protesters, his presence immediately commanding attention from the crowd. "That's enough," he said firmly, his voice carrying the authority of his years in security service. "This woman and her children have done nothing wrong. If you have issues with me or my actions, then address them with me directly, but leave this family alone." The protesters recognized him immediately, and their anger shifted from Sarah to Marcus himself. "You're the one who thinks rules don't apply to him," the lead protester accused. "You abandoned your duty and now you're being rewarded for it. What kind of message does that send?" Marcus looked at the man calmly. "It sends the message that protecting innocent people is more important than following orders blindly. The same principle applies here. These children shouldn't be frightened because you disagree with my choices." The confrontation escalated as more people gathered, some supporting Marcus and others joining the protesters. Security guards from the convention center were approaching, but Marcus realized that this situation could spiral out of control quickly if not handled properly. He made another split-second decision that would define his new career just as dramatically as stopping. The stroller had ended his old one. Instead of waiting for security to disperse the crowd, Marcus picked up the microphone from a nearby information booth and addressed everyone within hearing distance. 6 months ago, I saw a runaway stroller heading toward innocent people, and I chose to act, he said, his voice carrying across the exhibition hall. Today, I see a mother and her children being intimidated by people who have legitimate disagreements with my actions, and I'm choosing to act again. The hall fell silent as his words resonated through the crowd. The difference between those two situations is that today, I have the chance to explain my choices rather than just make them. I broke protocol because I believed that protecting lives was more important than following rules. Some of you disagree with that decision and you have every right to do so. Marcus looked directly at the protesters. But what you don't have the right to do is frighten children or harass a mother who has done nothing except accidentally lose control of a stroller. If you want to challenge my actions or my new role, then do it by engaging in civil discussion, not by bullying innocent families. The spontaneous speech became a defining moment in Marcus's transition from guard to advocate. Video of his words spread across social media within hours, praised by supporters as evidence of his continued commitment to protecting others. While critics argued that he was using his platform to silence legitimate opposition, Sarah Collins, overwhelmed by the public attention she never wanted, quietly thanked Marcus before leaving with her children. The protesters eventually dispersed, some grudgingly respecting his willingness to engage with their concerns directly, others remaining convinced that his actions represented everything wrong with modern society's disregard for rules and authority. As Marcus finished his presentations that afternoon, he realized that his new role would be far more complex and challenging than he had expected. Stopping a stroller had been a physical act with immediate consequences. Teaching others about courage and emergency response meant navigating the complicated world of public opinion, political disagreement, and the ongoing debate about when individual judgment should override established authority. But as he drove home that evening, Marcus felt a sense of purpose that he had never experienced during his years of following orders and maintaining protocol. His story had evolved from a simple moment of heroism into something larger, an ongoing conversation about what it means to do the right thing, even when it comes at great personal cost. The months that followed brought both triumph and struggle. Marcus's emergency response program grew rapidly, with thousands of people attending his training sessions across the country. Schools invited him to speak about courage and decision-making. Emergency services requested his input on civilian response protocols. The program that had started as Princess Catherine's vision became a national movement that saved lives weekly. Sarah Collins became an unexpected ally, joining Marcus at several events to share her perspective on how ordinary moments can become extraordinary through the actions of brave individuals. Her presence helped humanize the story, reminding audiences that heroes and those they help are just regular people facing unexpected challenges. The formal reprimand remained on Marcus's military record, a permanent reminder of the cost of choosing conscience over compliance. Some former colleagues still believed he had been wrong to abandon his post, while others quietly admitted they hoped they would have the courage to make the same choice if faced with a similar situation. On the first anniversary of the stroller incident, Marcus returned to the palace courtyard where it all began. The Children's Day celebration was happening again, with the same excited families, the same careful security protocols, and the same sense of joy and possibility that had filled the air a year earlier. Standing in the crowd as a civilian observer rather than a uniformed guard, Marcus watched as a new generation of security personnel maintained their positions with the same dedication he had once shown. He felt no regret for the path his life had taken, understanding finally that sometimes the greatest service comes not from following orders, but from following your heart when it leads you toward protecting others. The consequences of stopping that flying stroller had indeed changed everything: his career, his life's purpose, and his understanding of what it truly means to serve others. But looking around at the happy families enjoying a peaceful celebration, protected by guards who now received enhanced training about balancing protocol with human judgment, Marcus knew that sometimes the most important consequences are the ones that make the world a little bit safer and a little bit kinder for everyone.